the question that I wanted to start us with, because this is an introduction to what does play a story look like in your studio? How do you get up and running, and just how does it work? How do you as a teacher envisage this in your studio? So the question that we really should be asking right at the outset is, why bother? Why is it even important to improvise? Why is it important to teach improvisation in your studio? I asked myself that same question because clearly this is what I love to do. But is it okay just to love something and therefore teach it? Well, I think we've got to have a better reason for wanting to teach something. And if we don't have this already fixed in our minds, then it's going to be very difficult to talk to parents about it. It's going to be very difficult to talk to our students about it, get them on board and have them in a place where everyone is sharing the same vision for learning in our studio. Why is improvisation important for us? Well, I think that as a musician, we need to understand that improvisation is the means by which we generate new genres of music. We keep music alive, we keep it evolving and moving and redefining itself. And it redefines existing styles. And so, you know, jazz hasn't been jazz exactly the same way throughout eons. It's developed as different artists have come in and put their twist on it. But not just jazz, contemporary music have come out of our roots in all sorts of different musical styles. I think the other reason that it's important for a musician is that it's a real spontaneous communication. And that's what music is about. Music is about communication and being able to communicate in the moment. That's a really wonderful skill to have. And it's something that I think we as musicians need to do in order to make our music something that's very alive and provocative, perhaps, or relaxing, or whatever it is that we need to do to tell our personal story. Improvisation is also great for a musician because it releases our restraints on our inhibitions, on our expectations, on our judgments of ourselves and other artists. And I guess all of those things are the same for our teachers. So our teachers need to be able to be spontaneous and learn, especially in teaching, because it's all spontaneous. But we're learning how to play in the moment as we teach. And I think that's a really important thing as a teacher. As a student, as a piano student, how is it important for students to be able to improvise? Well, obviously it promotes physical freedom, individuality. It supports our music theory. There's no better way to learn music theory than by implementing it and creating with it. It offers ensemble jamming opportunities, especially using things like accompaniment tracks, which is very exciting. It's exactly what we're looking for or looking at creating right now, and we're already down that track, so that's pretty cool. It also heightens our students' sensitivity to musical interpretation. So as they're learning other pieces, it allows them to also be able to be sensitive to what other people are playing. And that's what we want. We want people to share their music in a space that really speaks to their heart. And certainly improvisation encourages and promotes that sensitivity. It also builds confidence. When you are a musician who can improvise spontaneously on the spot as you play, make it up, you've got a really confident musician, somebody who can play in any circumstance, under any pressure. Even, you know, we know that when you play performance, you are going to get those moments where you've lost the note, you don't know where you are on the page. If you're reading music, if you're performing, we know that we want to keep going And so what is the key ingredient to being able to keep going is knowing how to improvise, knowing how to kind of make it up and find your way and get back on board as soon as you can, especially if you're playing with a band or an orchestra, and they're going to keep going, and it's up to you to figure out how to get back on track. So it certainly builds a very confident musician. And you know what the bottom line is? It's just great fun. It's so much fun to be able to sit on the piano in whatever mood you're in, whatever time, and to just be able to sit and enjoy the playing as you go. So the other aspects, we've talked about why it's important as a musician, on improvisation, as a teacher and as a student. But you know what? I actually think it's incredibly important for humanity. I think that what we can contribute as musicians to the direction that this world is going is really, really special and really important. I think as a starter, just for therapeutic benefits of hearing somebody playing from their heart, playing genuinely, playing honestly, for stress relief, to be able to process their feelings. I think also, you know, we're moving into a world where our problems are becoming a little bit off the page. You know, they're outside the normal box. And I guess it's always been like that. But we feel like in the generation that we're in, oh my goodness, it's like escalating really fast. So we have to learn to think creatively. We have to learn to solve things differently, to work around problems and solve things in a really innovative way. And so learning improvisation on the piano or any other instrument really supports that type of thinking. On a purely physical level, it increases our brain capacity, and there are lots of studies, particularly at the moment, it's a bit of a hot topic as to what is actually happening inside a musician's brain when they're able to improvise. So, and I think the other thing is that improvisation for the world brings inclusivity. So being able to appreciate different perspectives, different opinions. You know, what better way than for us to teach students that when they improvise, it's how they see the world. It isn't that we just play how Beethoven saw the world or how, you know, some contemporary artists might see the world, but we actually all have a privilege of expressing how we see the world musically as well. And so they're my kind of thoughts on why I would bother improvising myself and why I feel it's really critical to teach our students to be comfortable in this style of playing. So over to you guys.
I'll pick up on something that you said, Lyndel, and that's the creativity as being a skill that students are going to need in the future. That's, you know, what I think we're learning in education circles around the world and in all subjects is that students don't need to learn all the facts that they can get on Google. It's not about just learning a series of things that they could get elsewhere. It's about the skills that are going to help them do any job in the future. Kids are going to have 15 careers, right? So it's about what you said. It's about that creativity. It's about being able to problem solve, think critically, work with others. They're the skills we want to give them. And so if in our piano lessons, we can do less of the, here's what you could learn on a YouTube clip and here's what you could Google, instead of that doing the whole, well, let's give you some skills to be creative at the keyboard, then, you know, that's going to help students in all aspects of their lives. So I think you're right on the money there.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Any of your other guys?
Same. I think. I mean, I've been encouraging all my students to create and improvise and tell their stories. And they're the ones who I haven't started doing it with, because I also teach a simple music program, as you know. They are struggling because they want. And they struggle to, because they are so used to being told what to do and how to play it. Whereas those whom I've started teaching musician play a story, they are just running with the wind.
I love that.
Love it. and the parents love it because they see the difference between their children performing in front of an audience compared to someone who has a sheet in front of them and playing what is in front of them. And the stories that they come up with, you know, there's wars, there are dinosaurs, there are explosions happening. It's just having fun in the park, you know, and those are all expressed on the keyboard, and it's just lovely.
Yeah. I love that. I just never thought of this before, but you know, because I always tell my students, when you're concentrating on reading the page, it's sometimes very difficult to hear, how am I actually playing? Am I telling my story while I'm reading this page? And you know, you just said something that just really ticked a thought bubble for me, and that is, when you perform, if you're performing with your sheet there, you're almost just performing to that page. That's where your thinking is. That's where you're gaining all of your feedback, all your information almost. And to be able to play off the page, to be able to be playing, almost performing to what you truly hear, that's a really different concept. I love that. Thank you, Shaymay. Awesome. And any of you other girls, just to sum of this little section up, anything else that you wanted to add here that we haven't perhaps touched on?
I will. I'll say something. I just became licensed and play a story, so it's new to me, but the concept isn't new. That's what I really emphasize with my students too, is getting that broad experience spectrum of artists. It's just like you said, in classical periods, that was them interpreting their times. In blues, that's them interpreting their times. In 2017, you think of all the... I would love it if you could take that somewhere else. Between our technology and service providers, you know, just that in itself, and how much we can do, how much further we can go with music that we weren't able to go before. And that's incredible that we can put all of these different genres together. And you know, I have so much music that are just a culmination of different genres, and I want everyone to find their own voice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that can culminate with our younger students, everyone, and no matter how old they are. You know?
Yeah, I love that. And just helping people find their own voice. How many arenas do we get to do that with, you know, in education? A lot of the time it's, you know, we've just got to study. I've got kids all doing, you know, final years in high school and university, and it's very much drill, drill, drill. We've got to learn this stuff, and we have to do that. I don't want a doctor that hasn't done that. Right. I don't want him to make it up while I'm on the table. But, you know, yeah, you're right. Finding our own voice is just such a beautiful thing to be able to offer our students. It's just awesome. All right, so just moving forward, let's have a look at, you know, now we've got in our own headspace the idea that we know why improvisation is important, and it sounds like we're all on board, we all get that. The next step is, how do we communicate that to our parents who are going to have to buy into this whole idea of improvisation, and maybe they're going to be the ones that this concept is the most foreign to, because it's not been something that they've perhaps traditionally learned to do as they've been playing the piano, if they've already had piano in their background. It isn't a concept that's just a given yet. We're working on it. So we also need to know, how are we going to communicate this to our students? Because again, if they're not on board, then they're not going to own this for themselves. And if there's anything that they need to do, is own it for themselves. So how are we going to talk to parents first of all? So I guess I've got a couple of ideas, maybe just 3 little points that I think is an important aspect in how we communicate this to our parents. I think first of all, we have to communicate that this is an essential component of our overall music experience. And that's why we're learning it in our studio. So I teach a very holistic program. We've got learning by rote, we've got learning by reading, we've got technical skills, and we also have the creative aspect of improvisation that we teach in our studio, and it's a big part of our studio just as much as every other component. And you know, when you're communicating that, be confident that you are the professional expert here. You know what you're talking about, and we need to kind of give that confidence to our parents as we talk to them. I guess too, what can happen with parents and their sort of preconceived ideas about improvisation is that they might kind of see it as a bit of a mucking around thing, you know, or when they hear it even at home, potentially it sounds like mucking around. And we have to kind of be able to say to them, this creative process actually supports everything else we do in our studio. As I said before, one of the best ways to learn theory is to use theory. Use those concepts. One of the best ways to learn technique is to experiment with different ways of playing, whether we're playing big, loud, expressive, dramatic pieces, or whether we're playing very delicate, you know, almost new agey kind of moving moments. We're going to use different technique for both of those totally different opposite feelings of music. So technique is going to be able to be moving within what we need to produce those particular movements in music. And also, I'm always going to be talking to my parents about the time that they spend in my studio. I have a long-term view as to our relationship. And so I'm not just going to teach them this little bit and that little bit and then we're done. I actually want them to see way into the future and know that we're going to have this building relationship, that we'll always have this component of improvisation, and that it's going to be a big part of our time together. Over to you guys. What kind of parts of the parent conversation do you see that's really important to include in order to get those parents on board?
Okay. What I've discovered in my teaching or speaking with parents is that you have different groups of parents. You have groups of parents who want the children to read music. You have groups of parents who believe, like you said, you know, yeah, because they believe in the traditional way of learning music. And so when it comes to improvisation, they get very frustrated with the kids because they are not reading, they're not playing the music that they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually quite tough to talk with them, because what I do say to them is that they're exercising when they're in a creative space. They need time and the space to explore. Yeah. And when you have the pressure from outside forces to say you have to do this and you have to do that, they're not going to find that space to be creative, because they're working to a time clock. Yeah. And so I actually say to them that you need to give the children permission to, it's like, you know, when they start kindergarten, the emphasis is not about learning how to read. It's about, you know, learning the social environment. And so you're just developing a setting for them to explore what they're capable of.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so true. All right, well, what about for the students? You know, how do we engage students in this process? What do you think it's important to communicate to them to get them on board? How do we talk their language?
I just actually had this conversation a half an hour ago.
Oh, wow. So off the press.
We were doing an arrangement of a song. She goes, "Oh, my arrangements never sound that good." And I said, "You've got to start somewhere. Yeah. You have to just get your feet wet. And first you're going to put your toe in, and then you're going to stick your foot in, and then your calf will be wet, and then you'll be swimming, and then you'll say, wow, this really wasn't so bad, was it?" So I think that that's the biggest hurdle. It's getting started. My personal progress as a musician is just jumping in. don't worry about the outcome. Do it first. And I think it was F. Beck who said the best, compositions come from the mistakes, So you can't be scared of those.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I feel like we almost need to hold the lamp out to them, hold a lantern that shines the way a little further than they can see for themselves at that moment. When a student says, oh, when I just make it up, it just doesn't sound like, in our case, perhaps they've watched the demonstration videos where the kids are playing the piano to the movie and they're going, oh, I can't do it. When I do it, it just doesn't sound like that. I think that we have to enlighten their impression of what they do for themselves. I love it when a student brings me a gift of, this is me. For however, wherever I am on my journey, this is me. And for me to be able to really invest in building their confidence and their sense of joy from what they've given me. And I think a good teacher is the teacher that's wanting to pull that potential out and really confirm a student's musicality, their inner musicality. It's really important, and it's one part of our teaching that can really shine in this area of improvisation.
Right.
Yes. So,
can I chime in? I told both parents and students to picture a cake. So imagine a 4-tier, huge cake, like wedding cake, and the bottom layer, the biggest layer, is the foundation, and I compare music learning. It's from music learning theory, and I learned that from Tim's podcast last year, and I've since fascinated with music learning theory. It compares music learning to language acquisition. So the bottom layer, say if we are learning language, the bottom layer is the listening. Mm-hmm. Then you speak. That's the next layer up. Then you read. Then you write. So now take that 4 layers: listening, speaking, reading, and writing to music. Mm-hmm. What do you have? You have also listening, the emergent experiences, like what you did in the scene. They first listen. And then after that, speaking is the improvisation. Speaking is what play a story all about. Mm-hmm. And reading is where the traditional lessons are. Mm-hmm. Then writing is the composition. I told all of them that if you only do the traditional approach, you only get a small portion of the cake. Yeah. And is that what you want?
No one ever wants a small portion of a cake, Karen, do they? I love your metaphors. They're so much fun to listen to. You're so creative.
Yeah, and it's so cute. My student drew that in her notebook. I didn't ask them to do anything, and she came back with a drawing of the cake on her notebook.
We learn from the masters, don't we? They're so beautiful. So, and I sort of talk to my students about, you've got bragging rights if you can improvise. You've got street cred. So when you improvise, you're doing it like the masters. They all do this, and even, your contemporary musicians, they improvise. So yeah, let's really encourage our students and get them on board as well. So let's have a look at another aspect of introducing it into our studios. And we've touched on it a little bit, even just in that little conversation there with Karen, where I feel almost like parents, students, even teachers have kind of got a tradition of, we put everything into a little box. So here we do our scales, now we do our rote learning, now we do our reading, and now we do our improvisation. And it's actually a really hard way to teach because you can't fit it all in. And even I've heard teachers sort of say, oh, we do improvisation as a little warm-up into the rest of our learning. And, you know, maybe they do it in the piano lab where I've got my program and they've got a little thing, they put earphones on, they do it for a few minutes before they come in and have their real lesson. And I think it just doesn't do our students a service by compartmentalizing all of these components. I really think that all of our learning has to form the ingredients of that 4-layer cake. There has to be ingredients of reading within the improvisation. We need to know how to read a lead sheet if it's just chords that we're reading, or we need to understand theory, we need to understand rhythm, time signature, key signature to be able to improvise at the top of our game. And so introducing improvisation, just using our small motifs that we do, is bringing in all those theoretical concepts that they're always going to use for the rest of their lives in an improvisation, in a creative setting. And so I think that it's really important that we don't just have students come in and take up a little 5-minute slot and then not use the material at home. I think that's tragedy. How do we get comfortable with improvisation if we're not saying, improvise every day, it's all part of your musical life? Take the piece that you've learnt by rote and change it up. Do your own thing with it. Take a piece that you're reading, note the key signature, note the time signature, note the feeling in the piece, even work out what the chords are that make the progression of this piece, and then do your own thing with it. You know, create something and make it different every single day. You know, we're not composing at this point necessarily, but as Karen said, we're leading to that. So let's be experimental. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. And of course, I can't remember who it was mentioning before about the player picture. So every single week, my students come in and they've got their scrapbook with their own picture on it. And that's the thing they want to do first, because part of who they are. So they play their picture or play their story to their scene, and we're off and running. Even when we're way down the track, my teenagers who started with Play a Story a few years ago even, they're still playing their own pictures, because that's just part of our culture. That's who we are, we create. So I think that we need to learn improvisation by doing it. I think that's the best place to learn how to do it. It brings me to our training for our teachers. So, you know, it's hard as a developer of a program to kind of put myself in the shoes of my teachers, because to me, it's just so obvious, like, just go do it, guys. And yet I know, you know, whenever I've introduced myself to a new program, I'm going, oh, so what were they thinking behind that process? How do I make that work? And, you know, there's a lot to think about. So for you new teachers that are even here in our chat room and on our screens here, what I would say to you as a very first thing to do in training yourself as a teacher of the Play a Story program is to be a student. Don't think about it in terms of, how do I get going in my studio? What does it look like? How will I have all of these conversations with parents and students? And all of that will come. But explore improvisation for yourself first as a student, as a learner. So I would say the first thing that you do in order to get yourself going is explore the scenes. And I think that the best thing to do is just to open up the program. So I'm gonna switch screens here. So this is our beginning of our journey. So as a new teacher to our program, you would have actually got the navigation video. That's a given. You've got to watch that and it'll show you all of this. But really what we're wanting to do is start from the beginning. And so go into your very first scene of the Zeppelin. Start with the listening, getting the mood, have a look at the motif, go up here and play along with the story, and then maybe show yourself a little demonstration just so you can kind of see the bigger picture. Then I'd recommend coming straight back down here. These are the mood setters again with the music, and then this is where you're going to play along to the track. So as a student, experience it in that order. And then finally, if you want to go have a look at the basic demonstration, which is just, as you can see, it's just a few more notes. And then here, which is, you know, all sorts of artistic license. So explore this whole page, this whole scene first. Then what I would recommend that you do is go ahead and go in and check out the coaching sessions. So this is where you'll be able to understand, how do I unfold this to my students? These are presuming that your students have never played the piano before. They're actually really great for students who have, because they'll kind of make sure that they've got that motif locked in. But certainly your advanced students don't need to go through all of these different steps. And then as a teacher, go ahead and look into your live lessons. And so this is where, you know, you're a fly on the wall of a studio, and knowing that every class offers a different opportunity to teach in your own style, and you're going to use your own language. The only thing I'm going to recommend is that you think about, if you're going to teach it as a standalone program, you know, that you think about the flow of the lessons. So thinking about, you know, setting the mood, opening up the motif, teaching the motif, round robining it, maybe even demonstrating it as a musician yourself. Have the movie there and play along to it, then opening up the motif, round robining it, and then the next week coming back and playing it as an improv. It's just a kind of a nice, simple way to teach the program. It takes all the thinking out of it for you as far as lesson plans go. That's actually the lesson plan right there. So that would be a good way to approach your own training as a teacher. Be a student first, be a teacher second. And when you're looking at those two aspects, when you're looking at it as a student, ask yourself, how did it make me feel? Did I engage with it? Was it fun? Was it rewarding? Did I feel like I was progressing? Those are all the things that you want to think about as you're looking at that, because it's always good for us to imagine what it feels like to be a student of anything. And when you're looking at it as a teacher, visualize your own teaching. Don't just watch it and go, oh yeah, I guess I could. Because a lot of people say to me, I think you have to be like a certain personality to teach this. And I just don't agree, 100% don't agree. I think that you've got to bring your own flavour, your own personality to your teaching. Something that's helpful is just to observe the students' reactions in those classes. That's pretty cool. All right. So we've got the actual journey as the best place to do your teaching training from, exploring your scenes. Don't forget, you've also got our teacher notes, and they're pretty comprehensive, and we'll be adding to those all the time. I'm going to hope that all of you guys here have read through those teacher notes, because it does talk about some of the things that we've just talked about today, even that paradigm shift of moving from a very traditional perspective into a very creative perspective, and that whole idea of, you know, baby babble to start with. It's going to sound like baby babble when those little 4-year-olds get on the piano and start to play their tunes, because they're often very literal. You know, when they think about the dog, they're not calling it a dog, they're calling it a woof woof. You know, they're actually going to interpret the sound that they're creating as part of their language. That's what they're doing. They're interpreting the sound of the story into their language. So I love that. We talk about the ideal partnership of the student and the parent and the teacher all coming. Studio setups, what you need. By the way, welcome to my studio. So I've got a keyboard behind me that I often use for Skype lessons. So I've got my camera there, really easy setup, my grand acoustic here, and then I've got my beautiful clavinova behind me. And I wish I could show you, but I probably could twist it around, but I've got all my students in my seats here. But you know what? All the time we're at the piano, we're all hovering around the pianos here. So we've got the little kids in the front and then the big kids behind. That's what you're going to see in those live lesson demonstrations. But you're going to set up your studio with your resources, depending on how big your space is, depending on what you want for your studio. This is all yours. Design it how you dream it to be. teaching delivery, whether it's private, group sessions, shared lessons, all those sort of things, promotional marketing ideas, all of those. So all of that stuff is in your teacher notes, and it's really good to just go through those. We'll update those with conversations as we need to. Of course, also for your teacher training, it's so good for you to get onto our exclusive teacher chat group. Can't recommend this highly enough. I learned so much as a teacher from my fellow teachers. It's so incredibly important to share the love. It's why I love your group, Tim, your inner circle, to be able to just have a space where people are very genuinely sharing about their experiences in teaching. And I gain so much from that, and I love to jump in and kind of throw another idea around, and it's just incredibly important. So that chat group is actually a Facebook group, and it's limited to just our teachers. So we're free to kind of talk real, you know, it's not like it's going out to the public and everyone's going to be getting in there and having their, you know, 2 bits worth. So that's really important. And we're hoping to do more of these. This has just been a hoot, right? I've really enjoyed it. I've loved your company. I've loved the discussion that we've had. And I think that moving forward, what I'd like to do is tease out some of those aspects that we've really looked at really quickly, and perhaps focus on some of those things more. So looking at improvisation, why it's important, the introductory conversations, there's so much more that we could say about that, and perhaps to give demonstrations of how we would introduce it. You are my parents, how would I talk to you? What's my language look like? You're my students, how would I talk to you? How would I engage you in moving forward with improvisation? I think that would be cool. Talking about that first really important lesson, that introductory lesson. How do we modify that when we have a group lesson compared to a private lesson? When we have brand new musicians compared to our experienced musicians? When we've got young kids, when we've got older students? If we're using it as a standalone program, or we're using it as a threaded alongside program, what's our price point going to look like? How long should we have lessons for? These are really great discussions to have, and I would love to spend a whole webinar just on that introductory session and how we're setting up that first lesson, and then delving into our teacher training resources. I think that would be cool. So we've had a couple of questions through the week in preparation for this of, you know, what would you like? What do you need from these sessions? One of those is really important. How do you visualize teaching this to advanced students? Because our program is set up to be able to help those who are at the very beginning of their journey. We've got to cover that base. But we've certainly always had in mind, from the very moment that we began to develop this, we had in mind that we would allow more advanced students have had a lot more experience at the piano, to also embrace improvisation. And just because you've played the piano for a long time does not mean that you're comfortable with improvisation. So that would be an awesome thing to explore right there. Any ideas? Is there anything that you guys would like to contribute as far as, this is what I need? If you've sort of can put your finger on that pulse to say, as a brand new teacher, this is my perspective. This is what I would love to see, and I'm missing it. It's not there yet. Oh, great, fantastic. No problem. No.
I just want to pick up on one little thing from earlier, Lyndel, and that's that I was reading an article that Elisa Milne wrote a little while ago. Actually, it was more recently, because she just did some master classes in the States at MTNA. And her master classes, if you've ever seen them, are all about getting the kid to pretty much stop playing what's in front of them and instead play, improvise around it, make it faster, change the style, all that kind of stuff. And I thought that's exactly what you're talking about. It's for teachers, it's about, because the other thing she says is not every kid wants to just improvise. And I've found this as well. But just about every kid loves mucking around with ideas from a piece that they're already learning. And so the more you can kind of help us, because, you know, you're a superstar when it comes to these creative ideas for improvising, the more you can help in the getting kids off the page from written stuff, as well as just the improv from scratch, that could be really helpful too, I think.
Okay, great idea. And what that speaks to is this the wholeness of music learning, not compartmentalizing, so that you're touching in on being creative in every space that we teach into, not just as its own little thing. I love that, Tim. Thank you.
And it's the only way you can get through everything in all the lessons, right? That compartmentalizing is the thing that it makes people run out of time. You can't do it that way, but if you interlink, then you can do more. So yeah, right with you.
And it's something I've really learned from you, Tim, because it's sort of a big part of our discussions is how do we become a really superstar teacher by giving everything in this tiny, tiny space. Really important.
That's right.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Knock, knock. Can I talk?
Yes, please, Karen.
No, it's Mara.
Mara. Oh, bless you. Hey, girl. I saw you on there and I thought, oh, yay. So Mara's from New Zealand. Welcome, honey.
Yeah, but I was like, can we do a webinar one time on the private player story lesson? Because I think it would be interesting.
I do too. I really do. You know, when I was starting, Mara, I was always did group because I just have a passion for group. I love it because of its interactivity. Yeah. And of recent years, I've started introducing it to students on their own for various reasons. Sometimes it's better for children who are really struggling with, you know, autism spectrum or ADHD, that sort of thing. But sometimes I just don't have somebody to couple them with, and I'd just rather get them going than wait for a group. And so, Mara, I've really enjoyed, I have a couple of students at the moment who are just starting in Player Story. In fact, the first lesson was last week for one little 4-year-old. His name's Iggy, and oh, he just stole my heart. He's too cute. So, you know, teaching it in a one-on-one environment, it has a few different things to think about. But again, I'm going to say, you run with it. You know, you have to listen and get your feedback from that student, and in a way that generates how you teach it. But yeah, what a great idea. I'd love to do that.
I have one. I don't know if this is possible or if anyone has any experience, or even on your end, Lyndel, if you've ever hosted any camps during the summer. Just play a story. I would really love that. I'm planning on having a camp this summer, and I already have it all, like my date set out, and I'd love some ideas for how to incorporate that.
Fantastic. I'm hearing feedback. So someone's either taken the earphones out. There we go, we're better. You know what? I'm really excited about investigating that even more. I'm actually off overseas on some travel commitments for the next 2 weeks. In fact, I leave tomorrow. But when I get back, I've actually lined up with my my instrument supplier and just a really great guy who has a huge shop here in Perth selling pianos. And we're going to work out how to run day workshops on a Sunday where customers who have bought instruments from him who are now going, oh, no, I have to learn how to play it. How will I do that? We're going to introduce playing through improvisation in his store. So he's got his own little studio there, and everyone's going to grab earphones and go on to all of their different instruments. I mean, wow, how much fun will that be? So I'm certainly going to keep you updated on how that goes. And I'm also planning on looking into setting up like a pop-up studio in a shopping centre. So our local shopping centre up here over the school holidays one time is to literally host a pop-up studio where students can come in using the workshop material that we've produced of those 4 scenes and, you know, getting a few people involved and having their parents watch what's going on and seeing how fun piano playing really is. So I am so keen for that. I have to try and cut out this time that I can go, yes, we're going to do this, because everything else takes over, right? So, but I just can't wait for that. Has anybody else got plans in place for summer holidays? Because I know you US guys, you're all starting your summer break.
I'm thinking about that, but the difficulty is scheduling. My preference would be do one story per day and maybe 5 days.
Yes.
But if parents say they only have 2 days available, is it too much to have multiple stories, 3 stories in one day or one morning?
Well, you know what? It does depend on what a day looks like. Like, is a day session, a morning session and an afternoon session? Because, oh, wow, yeah, I would give one scene in the morning, one scene in the afternoon, next day, next scene, next scene. To me, that's perfect. I would do that. You know what? You will figure out what that space looks like, how much you can put in. The scenes that we've put into that 4-day or 4-session workshop all build on each other, so don't jump to one and work backwards or anything, but they are so tactile, they're so straight into your hands that they don't need to go and practice for a whole week before they've got it. Also remember, you don't have to have perfection in these workshops, right? Same as in a class. When, you know, we're not baking the cake in the class, we're just giving the ingredients, letting them play around with it so that they can do it later. So we don't have to look for perfection. We're just looking that they've got the tools and they're ready to go and that we can launch them. And we're whetting their appetites with it. It's a promotional tool. It's a marketing tool. It's to open that whole arena of the joy of playing music and being musical and creating music. That's the fun part of it. So I would really encourage you to, again, get that mindset. These aren't lessons in the traditional sense of it's a summer camp and therefore we have to learn 4 repertoire pieces and do 6 scales. Like, it's holidays, right? It's our one moment to go, whoa, let's throw the paper in the air and see where it lands. So yeah, I'm going to continue this conversation on webinars in the future too, because I think this is a goldmine for recruiting students, getting students to relight that flame of the first love that they had for music, you know, if they've lost that, to be able to just reinvigorate it. So what a great webinar session that would make. Love that. Look, it's 9:59. I can't believe it.
One more thing. I'm so sorry.
No, please do.
Yeah, you mentioned about teacher training. I just have to say the teacher training program you put together is wonderful. I have a request. If it will be very helpful if you can put in like some exception videos. What I meant by exception is that you have taught this for years, so you know where the potential problem spots or what issues the student may encounter. So if you can put together maybe just how to handle certain exceptions, and what are the potential pitfalls that you think a teacher may encounter, that will be great.
Wow, what a great idea, Karen. Would love to do that. I'm going to have to enlist some problem students. But yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Even if it's just, you know, videos saying, hey, look, there was a student and this is what happened and this is how I addressed it and this is the outcome of that. Or this is one way of addressing it, because, you know, we'll find our ways. We have our ways. But that's a great idea. Thank you, Karen. Well, these have been, I've had a ball. I don't know about you guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that it's been helpful. I'm going to sign this off right now, and don't forget, you can go back and watch it on the YouTube link. And hey, here's to many more of these for all you guys, just to kind of, you know, launch us further as you continue to teach Play a Story. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, Play a Story comes alive because of you guys. When it's just sitting in my studio, I love it, and I just, you know, if I could just have all Play a Story students, I'd be a pig in mud. But to know that it actually takes a life outside myself, outside my own studio, I can't tell you, it's so overwhelming. It's such a blessing. And you guys are everything. I love you. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lyndel.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining.
See ya.